On Wednesday, the 29th of January, Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves outlined her plans to grow the UK economy. In this video, we'll discuss what it means for transport investment, specifically looking at 4 key projects she outlined: Lower Thames Crossing, Old Trafford redevelopment, East-West Rail, and Heathrow's third runway. Welcome to Network News. Starting with Lower Thames Crossing, and whilst Reeves has signalled support for the scheme, she is seeking to involve the private sector in its delivery. At a total length of 14.2 miles, the road would provide a motorway-style link between the M25 north of the river and the M2 and A2 south of the river, and is designed to relieve the Dartford crossing by providing a more direct route between the port of Dover and destinations in the Northern Midlands. Just over 2.5 miles of it would run in a tunnel under the Thames, and its total cost is estimated at about £9 billion. By involving the private sector in its delivery, the Treasury gets to save money in the short term, though this usually ends up being more expensive in the long run. Auto Shenanigans has a great video on the topic, which I've linked below. This isn't the first time I've linked to this video, but it continues to be evergreen when concerning private sector involvement in major infrastructure schemes. Given the scale of the project, it may be tricky to attract private sector funding for the whole thing, so I guess it remains to be seen whether it'll be delivered, and if so, how it'll be funded. Secondly, she confirmed backing for the planned redevelopment of Old Trafford, which would either see the existing stadium refurbished with a capacity of 87,000 seats, or a new stadium built with a capacity of 100,000 seats. As well as this, the redevelopment also includes major opportunities for new commercial and residential spaces, including 17,000 new homes capable of supporting a population of 42,000 additional residents. What's this got to do with transport though? Well, much of the development is proposed to take place on a Freightliner intermodal terminal next to the stadium. This site is currently operating at capacity, moving up to 20 trains per day, but sits right in the middle of the planned development. The solution is to build a new freight terminal just east of Newton-le-Willows, at the point where the West Coast Main Line and Liverpool to Manchester Railway intersect. This facility would have increased capacity when compared to the current one, and would also mean that freight trains could be removed from Manchester city centre, especially the notoriously congested Castlefield corridor, allowing for an increased frequency of local trains. Combined with the planned rebuild of Manchester-Oxford Road, this means the Castlefield corridor could see a pretty significant uplift in its capacity over the next few years. Additionally, the new development itself will also need increased public transport links. It's not clear what form these will take yet, but it's not unreasonable to assume that we could be looking at a new train station or an extension of the Metrolink tram system. The other rail announcements in the speech pretty much entirely consisted of re-announcing schemes which are either already underway or have already been completed, including the Wigan to Bolton electrification, Transpennine route upgrade, and new platform at Bradford Foster Square. However, she did draw particular attention to East-West Rail, the plan to build a new mainline railway between Oxford and Cambridge. She reiterated its importance in the government's ambition for the so-called growth corridor between Oxford and Cambridge, which is expected to add £78 billion to the UK economy by 2035. She drew particular attention to the potential for new towns to be built along the railway, and for the construction of Tempsford Station to be accelerated, opening up to 5 years earlier than previously planned so that it can start serving East Coast mainline trains even before East-West Rail is fully up and running. Frustratingly, there's still no plan to electrify the line in full, meaning it'll be dependent on discontinuous electrification. Whilst this may be able to work for passenger trains, one of the key objectives of East-West Rail is for it to carry freight traffic, which requires full electrification in order to work without being dependent on diesel. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. You've almost certainly heard this already, but the government has also given its backing to a third runway at Heathrow Airport. This would increase the annual passenger capacity of the airport from 84 million to 140 million passengers a year. Supporters claim that expanding Heathrow is essential for the UK to maintain its international outlook, saying that it could support 100,000 additional jobs and add 0.43% to the UK economy by 2050, or about £17 billion per year, whilst opponents say that it is totally incompatible with our climate targets, adding at least 3 million tonnes of CO2 to the atmosphere each year under the best case scenario, an amount equivalent to some small countries. Additionally, there is evidence to suggest that it could actually have a negative impact on the economy, with the New Economics Foundation finding that in 2023, aviation was responsible for £41 billion leaving the UK economy, as incoming tourists were outnumbered 3 to 1 by UK residents travelling abroad for leisure and spending their money overseas. Despite many Labour MPs dropping their opposition to Heathrow as a result of this announcement, the Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has remained a vocal opponent, saying, "I remain opposed to a new runway at Heathrow Airport because of the severe impact it'll have on noise, air pollution and meeting our climate change targets. I will scrutinise carefully any new proposals that come forward from Heathrow, including the impact it will have on people living in the area and the huge knock-on effects for our transport infrastructure. Despite the progress that's been made in the aviation sector to make it more sustainable, I'm simply not convinced that you can have hundreds of thousands of additional flights at Heathrow every year without a hugely damaging impact on our environment. To back up his argument further, the Independent Climate Change Committee's Balanced Net Zero pathway only allows for a 25% increase in aviation passengers by 2050, which doesn't require any airport expansion. To fend off some of these fears, Reeves said that the proposal would undergo a full assessment through the Airport National Policy Statement to ensure that a third runway is delivered in line with our legal, environmental and climate obligations, and also committed £63 million to developing sustainable aviation fuels. Frankly, it is staggering that in the midst of a climate emergency, the government is prioritising investments in roads and airports, whilst rail, the far more sustainable option, is being thrown the scraps, with little more than re-announcements of projects which are already underway. Improvements to freight facilities in the northwest is welcome, as is completion of east-west rail, but it's nowhere near the level of what's needed. The silence is deafening when it comes to the lack of any news of rail improvements north of Handsacre Junction, where there's a very real likelihood of the rail network having less capacity following the opening of HS2 Phase 1. As for Heathrow, it's clear that any expansion of the airport is dependent on sustainable aviation fuels, but this is a technology which is still largely unproven and certainly doesn't look ready to be deployed en masse anytime soon. And even when it is, the land take required for the crops needed to make sustainable aviation fuel is likely to be massive and potentially require mass deforestation to be accommodated. Hardly an ideal solution. It seems clear to me that even with an adoption of sustainable aviation fuels, we need to reduce the amount of flying we do. One way to reduce the number of flights, whilst also potentially freeing up slots at Heathrow for international traffic, would be to invest in a high-speed rail network, which would also deliver enormous benefits for passengers and freight across the country. For example, completing HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail was predicted to double the economic output of Greater Manchester to £132 billion by 2050, a number significantly higher than Heathrow's dubious growth estimates, and a number which only accounts for the benefits to Manchester. It's not unreasonable to assume that with the right policy, similar levels of economic uplift could also be seen in other cities across the network. Unfortunately, this whole announcement comes across as a panicked reaction from Labour, keen to be seen to be doing something to boost the economy after growth statistics have been lower than expected. It also seems strange that their attempts to boost the economy in the short term are relying so heavily on a project which wouldn't be delivered until the mid-2030s at the earliest, or even the 2040s if we're being realistic. Heathrow's expansion would also undo nearly all of the carbon benefits of Labour's flagship green energy plan. In summary then, the whole thing is remarkably illogical, based on dubious data regarding growth, and almost certainly incompatible with our climate targets. As for Lower Thames Crossing, I feel like it goes without saying that this will also be a disaster that'll only increase pollution and do nothing to fix congestion. It's been proven time and time again that increasing road capacity doesn't fix traffic, and this is no different, with analysis from Thurrock Council showing that it'll only take about 5 years from its opening before the Dartford crossing is at capacity again. Additionally, its construction would result in massive habitat loss, with 8 hectares of ancient woodland destroyed across its 14-mile route. Compare that to 21 hectares across HS2's 140-mile route, and it's clear which one is the better solution. Ultimately, it remains to be seen how many of these projects will end up happening, or whether they end up getting caught up in legal and economic hurdles. What does seem clear, though, is that the government is very much heading in the wrong direction when it comes to transport infrastructure. Don't forget that this is the same government which cancelled the Restoring Your Railways Fund within weeks of coming into power. So, those are my thoughts on Labour's growth plans. But what are yours? Does it represent wise economic policy, or panicked short-termism that'll harm us in the long run? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Network News for more updates like this, and until next time, thanks for watching.